Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Be More podcast, where we inspire you to be more of every role within the Salesforce, Slack, Tableau, and MuleSoft ecosystems. For today's session, we are exploring what it means to be more Salesforce design. And I'm privileged today to be joined by Katka. So if you could start by introducing yourself to our audience for me, please.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for having me. And hello, everybody. My name is Katka. I'm based in Prague in the Czech Republic. And before entering the Salesforce ecosystem, I actually studied marketing communications and graphic design. I also earned my living by wedding photography. So I've been all over the place before entering IT and design specifically. I even had my own IT company at some point. And I was just so ambitious that I wanted to actually develop with my partner and with a couple of other people a competitive product to Salesforce back then. It obviously was an epic fail. We didn't do that. And then I finally transitioned into the right side.
Yeah.
And I've been in the ecosystem for the last 10 years now.
Okay. Awesome. Well, that's great. And thanking you again for making the time to speak to me today. So maybe quantify it a little bit for our audience. Like we're talking Salesforce design, perhaps on like a really broad level now, but what types of things does that role entail? Like what responsibilities would you have if you're responsible for something as broad as a Salesforce design?
Yeah, it differs and it depends.
Yeah.
My consultant mindset would say, because since design role is not necessarily established that well as many other roles in the ecosystem. It varies depending on a project or a company or the particular person that holds the role. But maybe before we get into what it actually does, what I actually do, I also want to distinguish between some other things because sometimes the terminology is a little bit confusing. Since when we speak about Salesforce project, there's also technical design and solution design. So this is not necessarily that. When we refer to design in what I am doing, it is mostly user experience design. And I would basically split it into three main areas that I see. Not necessarily all the areas are usually held by one person or maybe are not even relevant to some companies in that whole breadth. But at the same time, like from the theoretical standpoint, it's important to include them so that our audience has an idea of what it actually means. The first one is strategy design. This one is like the most abstract and the most high level, I would say, because it's basically it happens at the very beginning of the project where we are actually exploring what we want to solve with Salesforce technology or any other technology, actually. It is about the collaboration with product owners and product managers, with a client if we are on the consultancy side, or with other internal stakeholders if we are on the customer side. And it is basically about defining what is the problem that we want to solve with technology. And this consists of various workshops, creating a roadmap of features and stuff like that, very, very high level and at the beginning. Then we move to the second area, which is actually user experience design. This is a lot about conducting user research, understanding what our users want, either for an existing implementation or a completely a new implementation. It is very much adjacent to business analysis and requirements gathering, even though it's looking at it from a very different perspective. And then there's also a user interface. That is something that typically many people associate with design, creating the nice stuff, changing buttons from blue to green and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which, in a sense, that's what it is. But again, people who focus on user interface design, these are people who are very proficient in Figma, for example. They understand Salesforce Lightning design system and how it needs to be applied to either custom Lightning web components or Experience Cloud or anything else. And they create mockups and prototypes and stuff like that. So I would say that these are three areas, and some people tend to focus on one or more. Some people just take one little element from that, and some people just do it all.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Well, I think that's really important to clarify, because I feel like it's about to set the scene for the next few questions as well. So thanks for that. So thinking of your role as a designer, what type of other roles or other people would you interact with within the ecosystem? And I feel like we've touched on a few already, but are you able to dive into that a little bit more for us?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I think that it very much relates to the misconception that I already mentioned, that many people think that design is only needed for customer facing projects or needs to be only introduced later during the delivery stage and implementation. But in fact, it ideally, in the ideal world that I haven't seen that much yet.
Yeah. Still trying to find. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like an essential part of every single stage of a process or a project, such as define, design, deliver, and then a test, which then means that a designer would ideally collaborate with almost everybody. At the very beginning, they would collaborate with a client who is just scoping the work, or an internal stakeholder who would say what actually needs to be done. Then they would work closely with architects to make sure that user needs are reflected in the high level architecture. Then they would move on and work with business analysts to gather requirements and to add the design lens to the business requirements. And then also consultants and developers, then also helping them produce some of the mock-ups that I mentioned, or just make sure that things are also visually aligned, and the Salesforce Lightning Design system is reflected. And then with testers at the end, because you also want to make sure that all those things that a designer had proposed throughout the whole process have been actually implemented in it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, at least from my experience, right, the testing bit at the end is often forgotten, right? Do you feel the same?
I mean, where I work, we have very, very, I would say, a solid practice when it comes to delivering end-to-end projects, and testing part is often something that's non-negotiable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I'm on the consultancy side, right? When I was on the customer side, it indeed was the overall value of testing and user acceptance was underestimated. And then everybody was surprised when it
Yeah.
was released. And it also leads me to another point that I actually wanted to mention, is that, after testing, we also need to speak about change management, user adoption and engagement. All those things actually play an, essential role if actually all the effort that we have put into a project will actually be beneficial or not, if somebody will end up using it. And this is also an element that I feel like is underestimated and should be more of a focus.
Yeah. Okay. Definitely. And I totally agree with that as well. Like, delivering a system is one thing, but engaging with the users and trying to get them ready for the change, excited about the system, and therefore using the system is a whole challenge of itself,
Yeah,
right? Yeah. Okay.
absolutely.
All right. Awesome. So, thinking about this now, and taking the role of Salesforce design, do you typically see people focusing on design full time? It sounds like that's an area where perhaps you fit in. Or do sometimes somebody focuses on design for part of their role, and then they are focusing on other things, like maybe building and configuring, like especially in a smaller consultancy, perhaps you wouldn't have the ability to be a designer the full time. I know I certainly think about design as an architect sometimes, not all the time. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say that I feel very privileged that I can be a full-time designer, because it is indeed something that it's not common. It's not something that the companies would be willing to invest in with such an importance. So yes, there are specialized designers who have been working full time and doing that kind of job. And since I'm part of the Salesforce designers community, I know that it's just that only a few of us who have been doing it. But then I see, let's say, two other types of people. One is people who have design forward mindset. And from what you mentioned, I feel like that would be probably a person who understands the basics of the design, who understands its importance. You have certain knowledge, but you mainly holds a different role, which I feel like is something that can make the biggest change in the ecosystem. And that's what I've been focusing a lot of my efforts when it comes to upskilling, training, mentoring, and other things, because I believe that consultants, architects, even developers, admins, basically anybody in the ecosystem can really have understanding of the basic principles, understand the value, know how to apply very simple techniques that don't cost much that don't take too much of the time, and then it's going to be great, because there is no need to aim for full-time designers and just, I mean, that's the North Star, of course.
Yeah.
But the design forward mindset, in my view, is the most impactful at this moment. And the last type of person, and this is actually something that I came up with when I was watching the episode with Paul on neurodiversity.
Yeah.
Because he mentioned, this term of being a neurodiversity ally. And I really like that, because I also see people who are kind of design allies, people who don't know much about design, who don't even maybe hold a formal a technical role in the ecosystem, but they are advocates and ambassadors. And they are able to just spread the word and make people understand that this is what we need to do. So these people are also important, but yeah, it's also a process to have more of them than we have right now.
Yeah, definitely. And I love how you brought it back to that previous episode, because that was definitely what I was thinking. Like, I was thinking of myself as like a design ally, but at the same time, when I'm designing solutions, I'm like, okay, sure, I'm going to use an icon and color, but I'm going to use both, because I shouldn't use one or the other. Like, I have some of these principles kind of embedded in me from the stuff that Salesforce teach on Trailhead and via the exams that I now bring into my everyday work. And I'm like, okay, well, we should really have some help text here, or we should really have this on this side of the page, or whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's great. Thinking about this now, if somebody's listening and they're feeling inspired, right, and they're maybe thinking to start out in their own design-based role, what tips advice would you give to that person?
I mean, I observe two paths people can take when thinking about the design role. One is being an experienced or even, entry-level Salesforce professional who is interested in design. And the second one is being a platform agnostic user experience designer who is interested in Salesforce. Because both of these roles can be a very successful user experience designer in the Salesforce ecosystem. But I do recognize, or what I've seen also over the years, that for Salesforce professionals, transitioning into the design role is much easier than for the other group, because we already understand for why we do it, and we like Salesforce, and that's what we do, while platform agnostic designers may struggle with the limitations that the platform brings, for example, in this particular field.
Yeah.
And when it comes to what to do, especially for the Salesforce professionals, which I believe is our main audience here,
Yeah.
I would say just, that very simple things that one can do if they want to elevate themselves from like somebody who doesn't do design at all into being a design forward person. It's about, as you said, understanding the basics, learning a couple of things on Trailhead, completing some of the modules, even considering the user experience certification,
Yeah.
basically acquiring the simple principles. Specifically, for example, what I would suggest is focusing on user research, because that's very close to requirements elicitation. So people may be quite familiar with that. It can extend their portfolio of techniques and tools that they can use in order to get to what our users actually need.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, also familiarizing themselves with Salesforce Lightning Design System. Because even though we all know what Salesforce looks like, and we know that it has blue buttons and other things,
Yeah.
really understanding the design system and how it should be applied when we are creating something new is essential, and is not that difficult in my view. So it's really like a low hanging fruit for many people. And just maybe to be a bit more specific, I can see, for example, an admin or a consultant running a simple user shadowing session, which is one of the tools of user research, where they, for example, look for potential enhancements for case management. And they would follow a service agent that would be executing some sort of a critical business process, and they would be observing what they have been doing, right? How they interact with different elements, what they click on, like how fast they go through all the process. And then potentially maybe afterwards they could also interview them a little bit more in the typical, business analytical way. And after that, they can, for example, suggest how to reshuffle certain fields, because they realize that the most used fields are at the bottom of the screen, for example. Or, they can maybe consider putting some key components on top instead of just having them aside, or remove certain elements that nobody uses, and it just slows down the whole performance of the page. So all those things can basically be a result of this simple session. And what I feel like is also important to recognize is that even though it may sound like, again, it's about appearance of the platform, it actually is not, because beyond this whole thing is actually influencing user experience, and also then considering what are the business goals and costs. Because if I speed up work of a service agent by, let's say, 1 minute per case, then if I just calculated how many times they do it per day, how many service agents we have a massive cost saving. And this is the lens that people should be looking at design, because it actually saves money.
Yeah, and I think you touched a little bit on kind of another side to that as well, in terms of system performance as well. Like, you shouldn't design, for example, a Lightning page with loads of components that are readily available as soon as you load the page, because that page is going to be slow as a result. It could end up being the slowest performing page. So you need to consider, well, actually, I don't need this component front and center. I can hide it behind a tab or an accordion or something, so it doesn't load and impact the performance of the page. So I think there's lots of different kind of veins to this. Don't you think?
Yeah, totally. And what's really tricky about this whole thing, that sometimes Salesforce default settings is not optimal, and it needs to be changed. Because, for example, as you mentioned, like, some people just would have, related lists as the default open, but then when I need to query all the data, it just takes a lot of time. Or, many times quick links is a component that's just by default on the Lightning page. But from my experience, this is something that almost nobody uses. Yet when I run the page analyzer in Lightning Builder and see which components take most of the time, quick links are the one
Oh,
that are
really?
taking so much time. Yeah. So just you can save time only by removing this, and already making a huge impact. So it's just really simple.
Yeah, and that's interesting actually, because recently on my social media, I've done a couple of polls about, in the Lightning App Builder, what do you use for related lists? Do you use related list quick links, related list single, related lists, or dynamic related list single? And actually, the sentiment kind of came out quite strongly in favor of quick links.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
I can see, obviously some of the other options perhaps have limitations on mobile and other things to consider, but it's like, definitely I could totally like relate to or get on board with opening up a record and not seeing 20 related lists straight away. Like, I don't need to see that. I think there is this kind of general feeling, right, about something, and if it makes things easier. Because in fact, another question I asked, and keen to hear your thoughts on this: details tab or related tab first? And I'm like, always the details tab, but like, what do you think? If you're designing a Lightning record page, would you really put related first, like it comes out of the box?
I think that this question will never be answered.
Really?
Like, finally, by the community, because I've been asking this question myself for such a long time. And, I'm a huge fan of having the details first.
Yeah. Thank
Because
you.
I'm like, I want to see, what's happening, what's the context, and then I would just dive in and see what the related records are. But I can imagine that there are certain use cases where it might work in a different way. And that's why, and this is yet another principle that just comes through with design, is that we can never work with our assumptions, because our assumptions may be very different from what users do. And even though my assumption may be that quick links are not used because I have seen it in a different way with many people, with a new project, ideally I would speak with the users of the particular implementation and ask them about it again, because this assumption may not be valid. And so that's the whole thing, that even though we may have certain experience and we have seen as Salesforce professionals many different things, and we can advise on best practices, ideally the best solution is always to speak to users first and then make a decision.
Yeah, and I guess understand how the users are feeling about the system. Like, is the system helping them or is it hindering them? Because I think if you dive into those things, you can start to uncover, oh, why isn't it helping you? Yeah. Okay. Now, thinking about this in a different way, I am reflecting on your own journey in relation to Salesforce design. If you were to start that journey again, what would you change? Is there anything you do differently?
To be honest, Tom, I feel like I've been extremely lucky when it comes to meeting the right people at the right time, tapping into the Salesforce design community very early. That has helped me a lot with, understanding what actually design means on the platform, because I come from a, graphic design and user experience background on custom solutions. But for me, just understanding what it means in an enterprise solution has been a process. Like the only thing that I've thought of when I was preparing for this is that when I've been in a position of a hiring manager, we have been hiring people on my team, and I've been looking for designers. I've been both looking at Salesforce professionals with this design forward mindset, and also platform agnostic user experience designers. And I ended up hiring a couple of user experience designers that didn't have much experience with Salesforce, and almost nobody ended up working with us in a long run, because I made an assumption that they would like Salesforce in the end.
Yeah.
But, for many people who just come from this massive freedom of wonderful websites and solutions that you can design in your own way, Salesforce is just not something they can accept. And I completely respect that, and I understand that. But what I would then change differently, to answer your question, is just put more effort into helping Salesforce professionals upskill and just guide them on their journey, so that I would have a stronger team there and appreciation for Salesforce, rather than investing my time into changing a mindset of somebody who is not ready to do this kind of work, which is not a bad thing. It's just, everybody has their own interest.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's all subjective, right? And I see like the Salesforce Lightning design system and the platform itself as relatively rigid. Sure, the Lightning design system is going through an overhaul at the moment, but it's the first overhaul that it's had in 10 years? So it's quite robust. For some people, that's great because that's a comfort. You know, they're not going to have to learn a whole new design system every couple of months or a couple of years. So I can see it both ways, especially if you're like a web developer and you can basically do whatever you want. It's going to be challenging. So I get that. Okay, so thinking about this now, what skills attributes would you use to describe somebody that's involved in Salesforce design? Like, what personality traits does this person need to have?
Yeah, I mean, apart from patience and endurance, because it's still such a new thing and you just need to consistently explain to somebody what it is. There are definitely some other, I would say, more of a hard skills to have. One, I would say, is for the strategy design, the most important one in my view is this holistic thinking. I would see it as a very similar type of thinking to what, I assume architects have. just seeing it in the whole picture in a helicopter view and understanding what we are actually doing and helping to facilitate the whole process. The second one, more in the user experience field, I would say just, excellent communication skills and analytical skills, because it's all about conducting user research, speaking to people, and then analyzing the outputs and just applying them. So that would be for sure another one. And the third one, related to user interface, is definitely visual aesthetics, and knowing that, certain colors don't go together, and, that paddings and margins have certain value in the design, and knowledge of Figma, at least basic one, because Figma has been used as the most common tool to create these prototypes and to work with the Salesforce Lightning design system.
And you can use the SLDS in Figma, right? There's a kit for that.
Yes, which is actually really good, because Salesforce has been releasing super helpful asset libraries. Basically, it is a set of all the components that you can think of that are already pre-made. So it's just basically like in drag and drop kind of stuff that we know all from Salesforce. You only do it in a slightly different tool. And even without, you don't even have to be Figma professional to put all the different things together and create your own mockup of a custom Lightning Web component. So I would definitely encourage everybody to try it out. Figma has a free account that is absolutely sufficient for this one. So anyone can try it out.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. That's great. So thinking about this now, thinking about Salesforce Design as a whole, if you'd like to clarify something or perhaps reconfirm or deny like a misconception that people have about design, like maybe there's a myth that goes around, and because you work in design, you do this. Is there anything like that comes to mind?
Yeah, I believe it's the one that I already mentioned. It's not only about color for buttons.
Yeah.
It's about, business results. That's the ultimate goal of any design, just to create something that's easy to use, that's friendly, that somebody wants to use, and thus, either increase performance, increase revenue, or just decrease operational costs. Whatever business result it is, design can massively contribute to it.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. So before we wrap up the session for today, what's a way for people to connect with you? And do you have any particular pieces of content or resources that would perhaps help somebody on their design journey?
I'm active on LinkedIn. I've been posting posts on either design or just some other similar topics on a regular basis. So I definitely encourage everybody to follow me if they're interested in that kind of content. I've been also running mentoring sessions, either one-to-one sessions or group sessions, where we speak about what it means to be a designer, and we just go into either mini projects or discuss certain tools and techniques that can be used. So people can also reach out to me with regards to this one. And in terms of other resources, obviously, apart from Trailhead, where there are many wonderful modules and projects on the topic, I would also suggest exploring NNG website, Nielsen and Normal Group. This is not Salesforce related, but it is, one of the, let's say, world's leading website when it comes to user experience. And many of the concepts and principles that they speak about there in a form of articles, videos, and webinars, trainings, all of that are very relevant and applicable to what we can do within Salesforce. So I would definitely encourage people to check that out as well.
Okay, perfect. And maybe bringing it back to Salesforce, as I often do. You obviously got the Dream Designer community on the Trailblazer community as well, which is a collaboration group for other designers, right?
Yes, that's correct. So that's also something that we can welcome people who are interested in the topic in.
Yeah, exactly. Open to everyone, designers and allies, everyone alike.
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's great. Well, thanks again for your time, and hopefully we will inspire some more people to be more Salesforce design. So thanks again.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. And yes, please be designers. Let's just change the world of Salesforce and have more designers in the field. I would absolutely love that.
That would be awesome. All right, thanks.
Thank you.